What was the creepiest thing you saw while driving at night? I was driving home from a party about 3 a.m. in December in the early 1990s. I was on a long rural road field on either side and it was pitch black. About 3 miles from anywhere, I saw the eyes of a dog in my headlights. It was just sitting by the side of the road. I slowed down for it and then realized there was a man's body lying next to it on the ground. It was pre-mobile phones and there was no way in hell I was stopping as a 23-year-old woman on my own, so I drove as fast as I could home and called the police. They phoned me back the next day as the man wanted for them to thank me. He'd been at the pub with his dog, was nearly home, and he had collapsed. Turned out he was diabetic and the alcohol had some sort of effect on him. Not really sure of the details on that, but he'd been there for hours and no one had noticed him. He was close to hypothermia. When the police found him, called an ambulance and took him to hospital. So his dog was a good boy, 10/10 for just staying with him. I wouldn't have seen him at all if it hadn't been for the dog. I accidentally took a wrong turn when trying to get to an on-ramp to I-30 and I found myself in a long dark country road. It was foggy out, so I was slowly driving along with this winding road, kind of enjoying the atmosphere, when I saw 2 reflected red eyes in front of me. As I got close enough to make it out, I saw it was the biggest fox I've ever seen, like about the size of a medium-sized dog. Its color was a more vibrant red than I've seen too. I came to a complete stop and it stood there in front of me, staring for maybe 25 or 30 seconds before sauntering slowly away. This is going to sound corny as hell, but in a word, it was majestic. Maybe it doesn't sound too creepy because it was just a fox, which isn't unusual at all, but the entire time I had chills and felt a sense that I was witnessing something special. I think I saw the king of the foxes or something. I was in rural Pennsylvania heading home from a customer and saw a Dodge drink on the side of the road with its lights on. I thought they may have broken down because there was nothing close by, so I slowed down as I passed. I saw a man on top of a woman on a pile of snow. It looked like he was strangling her. I went down the road until I found a pull-off, turned around, and went back. By the time I got there, the trunk was gone, but the woman was still lying there in the snow. As I approached, she sat up. I pulled over and asked if she was okay. She was in a thin dress with no coat and had blood under her nose. She said, "I'm cold." I had her get into the passenger seat of the work truck and turn the heat up. She just stared at her hands. I took out my little flip phone and surprisingly it had a signal, so I dialed 911. I told them what had happened and where we were. It took about 20 minutes for the police to get there. I offered her some water, but she just shook her head. The only thing she said was they're gonna arrest me. When the police car arrived, she said, "Thank you for helping." I got out and walked to the car. There the trooper asked me a few questions, thanked me, and went over to her. As I pulled away, he was helping her into the police car. He didn't cover, so I don't think he arrested her. A few days later, my phone rang while I was away from it with a voicemail from a restricted number. It was the trooper asking if I was willing to make a statement in case it went to court. I never heard anything about it again. Driving to the Grand Canyon with my mom in 2017. It was almost 2 a.m. and pitch black outside. Other cars were rare. Suddenly a man dressed in Native American clothing shows up in our headlights on the side of the road. He was walking away from us. I didn't say anything, and neither did my mom until about 2 miles down the road when we passed him again. I sat still for a few seconds before asking, "Did you see that?" My mom's response, "I don't want to talk about it." Basically, we both saw the same man walking in the same direction 2 miles apart. Same clothes and everything. No bags, nothing but the clothes on his back. I remember getting really cold and suddenly being wide awake. We stopped 40 minutes later in the next town and slept in a city hotel. I was on this long, almost 10-hour drive with my siblings and dad to go see the rest of my family for our yearly annual visit. We'd been driving for a while and had gotten to a point where we were basically in the middle of nowhere. The only thing around us was miles of grass and a pitch black road ahead of us with the only light coming from our car's headlights. I was playing a game on my phone when I heard my dad quietly say, "Jesus Christ." I looked up at him and saw his kind of staring off to the side a little. I followed his gaze out the window and saw what looked like to be hundreds of red lights surrounding us, continuously blinking on and off simultaneously. I took out my camera and started filming, cause I was just so weirded by what I was seeing. And at the moment, we drove for about 4 to 5 minutes in complete silence until I guess we finally passed whatever they were. Never completely found out what they were since when we drove back home. We didn't seem to pass them again. I still think about it from time to time. My guess was that maybe it was a windmill farm, which isn't really creepy but is the only logical thing I could come up with. I recently moved out in the middle of nowhere. I was about 5 minutes away from home when I stopped at a stop sign to look for a lighter in my purse. I noticed a man walking towards my car from the tree line and immediately drove off. It was pretty late at night and the closest neighbor is about 10 minutes out from where I am. It's all woodland and farms. There's no good reason that man should have been out in the middle of nowhere like that. I picked up my neighbors who lives a couple of miles away, who has a couple of young daughters himself, and we went out to look for the man. After reporting it to the police, we never found him, but his footprints were everywhere around the tree line. I never got out of the car, but my neighbor, he was properly armed and protected. Don't worry, spent a good 30 minutes searching the area. A couple of months roll around and they found the guy living on private property along with another man. They had been kidnapping young women for months and eating them, selling them on the black market. They used an abandoned shed as a slaughterhouse and had meat hooks hung everywhere. They found a missing woman naked and locked in a cage, and authorities believe dozens of the missing women cases in this area ended up there. It freaked me out for a while and still does. Being a woman, I'm usually extra careful anyway. It definitely felt like a wake-up call to take extra precautions. I remember getting the Amber Alerts at least once every other week, all with the same description: long brown hair, around 5 feet 3 inches, blue eyes. I have long brown hair and 5 feet 2 inches and has blue eyes. Really creepy. After this happened, I made it a point to become very familiar with firearms. I'm originally from Chicago, so that's saying something. Crime in the city is predictable. Crime in the South is straight up out of a horror movie. Two things both around the same time, actually. To set the setting, it was about 3 years ago. My job at the time had me leaving to go to work around 4 a.m. in the morning, 5 to 6 days a week. A horrible schedule for me. I hated it. I lived in the middle of nowhere, so I'd frequently see deer on the road and they'd occasionally jump across to the street out of nowhere. The scariest part was when it was extremely foggy outside and you literally could not see more than a foot ahead of the road. Anyway, one the day I'm heading to work, it's a bit foggy. I had already spotted several deer and a few had jumped out attempting what I can only assume is deer suicide. At this point in my life, I wasn't so much so scared of deer jumping out anymore, but I get kind of mad every time I have to drive to work, especially on days like this, thinking of all the financial hardships and stress that might happen if a deer decided to randomly commit deer suicide onto my car. Then, as I'm driving through the fog, I see what appears to be a shadow, or maybe a big stick. Like, as I get closer, it seems like just a big stick, to which I think, let me run this ST over, break it in half with my bare tires. As I'm inching closer to the shadow stick thing, the fog clears a bit and I see that it is not a big stick, in fact, but what appears to be a gigantic or normal sized. These guys can get big. Dead wolf. I quickly swerved to the left, just barely avoiding running it over. Literally almost had a heart attack. I even cried a bit. Second creepiest, the scariest thing, the same job. Maybe 4 months later, I'd take a different route to work that day. The bad idea is I'm driving down the road again. It's a bit foggy. The fog clears up a bit and what do I see? A giant bear in the middle of the road. I freak out like, what to do again? I live in the middle of nowhere. The roads, which are the size of one regular sized city road, or for some reason is the road for both ways of traffic, is narrow and there's literally nowhere to really turn. On the left there's a ditch, on the right there's a ditch. Suddenly this bear roars at me and starts charging towards me. I go fast and furious, more like the fight or flight, and very fearful. On this bear put my car in reverse, step on the gas pedal, then somehow navigate my way through the fog while going full speed in reverse, do a full 180 degrees and drive off the another way. No idea where I'm going. After about a couple of minutes, I turn on my GPS and find another way to get to work. To get to my house, you have to pass a pond. I'm not sure how deep it is, but there are turtles, some ducks, and I think some small fish. You can always see people there during the day, usually with kids throwing bread to the ducks, maybe casting in a fishing rod, or just sitting on the bench to watch the wildlife. There are 2 benches, one closer to the road, one closer to the pond. I'm driving home at like 9 o'clock, 9:30. I pass by the lake. I see a light there. It almost looks like a lamp, but I couldn't be sure, and next to it was a man just staring out of the water. I don't know why, but this scared the out of me. Why did he has a lamp outside? How was it even plugged in? What was he looking at so late? I'm sure others have creepier stories, but like this sat super weird with me. First of all, if like to clarify that I'm schizophrenic and see things all the time. That being said, you never said that the things seen has to be real, and it felt real to me. I was riding home in my mother's truck going down Highway 400 in Georgia. It was winter and snow was gently falling, and me being the paranoid that I am, I was worried about black ice. There wasn't any black ice, fortunately for me, but I did see something that I still think of sometimes. Every so often I saw what looked to me to be a very tall man standing next to the lampposts. Now before anyone says it, I'm not putting up a slender man sighting. This man had a face. He was definitely human, just that he was so damn tall and he was everywhere. It seemed like every other mile I would see him there standing by a lamppost just as it passes out of view. I knew it wasn't really that the same man couldn't be in so many places at once, but again, me who I was, I couldn't help but wonder, what if it was real? I'm not saying I saw something supernatural. I knew what I saw was a hallucination, but sometimes I think back and like to speculate about why he was following me. Maybe he just wanted a friend like me. I ended up drawing him tipping his hat to me as he stood next to a lamppost. It was nice to feel like someone cared enough to follow me. For whatever reason, a couple of months ago, I went for a late night drive through farm country. At one point I saw up ahead of me reflectors on the back of a vehicle on the side of the road. There were no actual lights on it. I honestly couldn't even tell if it was moving. I approached very cautiously and realized that they were indeed moving, although very slowly. I made my move to pass, going way far to the left because I still wasn't sure what exactly it was. As I came up towards the front of the vehicle, I finally realized it was a horse-drawn carriage. I don't live in an area is particularly well known for an Amish population. In fact, that's the only time I've ever seen a horse-drawn carriage around here, and the fact that I saw it at night just made it really eerie. I don't know if this counts, but me, my stepsister, and a friend of ours were driving at night out in the middle of nowhere to go check out an old plantation house our friend told us was haunted. When we got there, we parked on the road in front of what was once their slave quarters and just looked around, hoping we could see something paranormal happen. We were freaking ourselves out about seeing a ghost the whole time. I don't know how long we stayed there, but my guess is too long, because when I happened to glance in the rearview mirror, I saw this creepy old man that appeared seemingly out of nowhere, walking towards our car with a shotgun in his hand. I screamed. The other two looked behind us and they started screaming. We all thought he was a ghost. At first we hauled ass out of there, still screaming, until the old man was out of sight. This may not be as creepy as other stories on here, but for those first few seconds the old man scared the life out of us. One on a cross-country road trip this past spring with my friend Melissa and her 7 kids and 2 young German shepherds, starting in West Virginia. In a 20-year-old rechristened big bets, and almost everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Haha. Among other things, the water lines broke the night before, so we had to rely on jugs of water the whole trip. The gas tank cap was busted, so it was to get the cap off. Tires had good tread, but a couple were pretty old, so they worried me. We found out the batteries sucked, so we needed to jumpstart them with a power supply. Every time we stopped, their main battery cable had a bad connection, so every time we started the engine, I had to stand in front and jiggle the cable while she turned the key. The slide jammed, and we had to get a pray bar to get it in and out. Thanks for listening. The subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more things you don't want to know. Let us know in the comments what you think about these stories.